Good morning, everyone. And firstly, apologies for the state of my voice. It's kind of ironic that someone would be speaking to you about health in the workplace and well-being and not be well myself. I picked up a cold/flu a couple of days ago for the first time in about 5 years. So apologies that if my voice doesn't come across as clearly as it might. If anybody can't hear me, please wave your hand around or stand up and dance around and let me know so that I can see. Before I get started, as you know who I am, you have a little bit of background on who I am, so I'm not going to waste a whole lot of time because we do only have 40 minutes on a Zoom call. But one of the things I enjoy doing, particularly from my teaching background, is I actually prefer to do as little talking as possible. By nature of this being over Zoom, I do have to do some talking, but it's the way I used to teach. It's somebody I used to work for in education actually said to me, have you heard of the 3-step lesson plan? And the 3-step lesson plan is the lesson you plan in the final 3 steps you take before you walk into the classroom. I'm a firm believer in that. I won't lie to you. What I do like to do is I like to get people that I'm speaking to engaged in the process as much as possible. So rather than me telling you how to do things or sharing information with you, you're creating ideas. You're coming up with things that you can buy into yourself. And the reason I prefer to go about things that way is because when people are engaged in a process of creating information or solving problems, you're more likely to actually take action on that process and put something into place in your own life. So when we're talking about health and well-being, if I sit here and I say to you, you should all be exercising this much, and I teach you the most beneficial exercises to do, and I teach you about nutrition, and I tell you the healthiest foods you could be eating, and I give you a whole lot of information, a lot of people will sit there and think, oh, wow, that's really informative, and go away and do nothing. It's not because you're not good people. It's because we're people, and that's how we operate. And I can tell you that probably around 80%, don't quote me on that, of what you tell your students is exactly the same. They'll walk out of that classroom, they'll forget it, because that's people. What I'd like to do to begin with is if you could look around you and as much as possible in groups of 3, if that's 2 or 4, really does not matter. There's no magic number of 3. It's just practical. I'd like to throw out a question. In a group of 3, I'd like you to discuss, and for one person to write down, what do you consider the main factors that influence or affect physical health? Okay. What do you consider the main factors that influence or affect physical health and well-being? If you could just take a few moments, 2-3 minutes with 3 people to discuss that, one person write it down. Okay, if we do have that microphone, if we're able to take that around to anybody who's willing to share some of their ideas, what I'm going to say is, could you, any of your ideas, if you've discussed a lot of factors, that's wonderful. Anybody who does want to share, let's limit it to your top 3, okay? So your top 3 factors that influence physical health and well-being.
Okay, hello, my name is Natasha. Hi, it's nice to see you. Okay, so our top 3 is the food intake, the type of food, level of activity, physical activity, and the sleeping pattern.
So just to make sure I've heard you clearly, so you said physical activity, food, and you said sleeping time.
Sleeping pattern. So yeah.
That's it. Yes. I like that. I like that you said sleeping pattern. I'm going to come back to that. That's brilliant.
Anybody else want to? Yeah. Crystal. Hi, good morning. We would like to add mental health as well. I think mental health does affect physical health. And of course, sleeping patterns, nutrition, and level of activity.
See, this is why I do things this way, because then people do my job for me.
Anybody else want to say something? Would you like to come down a little bit here?
My name is Ahmed Nahas, PE teacher, and our message is about health lifestyle. We're talking about sports, nutrition, how we can wake up early, sleeping early, and also about behavior. Okay, so
I didn't catch the last one. You said also about
behavior, not just about physical. It's about everything in their life.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
we're talking about health lifestyle from each aspect.
Brilliant, brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You want to carry on, Trevor?
Thank you.
Okay.
So as I say, I enjoy asking people open-ended questions. People have a lot of access to knowledge about health and well-being. There are a lot of people who share information, and increasingly so. It is trendy to be healthy and well. There is an increasing volume of knowledge on mental health, but essentially, a lot of what people know is down to your personal engagement in what you would like to know. Most people have not been taught, for example, you will be teaching math, English, science. Most people have not been taught about how to live a healthy lifestyle in the same way that someone is taught how to do math. And that's another whole topic of conversation on our education system. But what I love about what has come out of this is three things: mental health, sleep patterns, and lifestyle, our behaviors, how we go about living our lives, because that's what I'd like to focus on today. I'm going to go with a theme of three. The first three is the title of what I'd like to speak about. It's rest, recover, recharge. And it's probably one of the things that is most overlooked in a corporate environment, but particularly in teaching. It's people are on the go, giving of their full energy all the time, whether that be in a single lesson or whether that be over the course of a year. Now, I'm going to share my screen. If you just bear with me, I just need to make sure I share the correct screen. Never want to be that person who shares the wrong screen. All right, can you see what is on the screen? Okay, great. Now, I'll just give you a very quick background as to what is on the screen here. So, as you can probably see in the background there, I enjoy cycling. I enjoy doing triathlons. Now, I have a lot of data that goes alongside my training. I work with a coach, and my coach isn't actually based where I am, so we rely on data. Now, what you're looking at here is a graph of stamina. Now, I'd like you to imagine, as I explain what this is, I'd like you to imagine your own energy levels throughout a lesson, throughout a day, and throughout a school year, okay? The orange line over here is the stamina reading based on feedback from my Garmin watch, which is reading heart rate, it's reading a whole lot of other body vitals as I am going for a run, all right? Now, this particular run, which is why I've chosen this one, because it's highly relevant, it's a good little analogy and comparison to our energy levels while teaching or while going about our day, regardless of what you might be doing, anything where you are giving of your energy. This particular run was an interval run, meaning I'm going through phases of faster and then slower, basically what we call recovery time. Now, if I'm not running faster, this orange line would be linear. it would pretty much go from start at 100%, I hope, and end somewhere around there. So we're looking at, what's that, or just about 50%, okay? And that's at the end of an hour. But what we're noticing here is, as I start to run faster, the stamina reading drops rapidly. Again, imagine this is you during a lesson. You experience bad behavior from a student. This is what happens to your energy levels. Now, the benefit of this particular training for me is that I have somebody structuring it for me, which means they have factored this in, knowing my body, knowing how I recover. They've factored in time for me to recover. So I go for call it a sprint, and then I go for a very slow phase where my heart rate drops right down and I am recovering. So I bring this stamina back up, hopefully back up to where it would have been if there was a linear line. And then I go for the next interval, and you get the picture. Now, the problem for most people, if we go back to this theme of rest, recover, recharge, the problem for most people is that this is the trend here, and this never happens. Now, again, imagine yourself during a day. Where do you end up? You end up over there. You end up at the bottom. Now, don't be fooled by the numbers there that say stamina 79%, because that's obviously reading over there, okay? If we do not recover, if we don't have things that refuel us, help us to go again, this line ends up down there. It's not what we want, but unfortunately, it is the reality, whether that be during a lesson, during a day, or during a school year. If you think about how you feel right now after a wonderful summer holiday, you're probably feeling a lot more energized than you felt 2 months ago at the end of the school year. Now, we want to look at how we can potentially change that. So I'm going to run through a couple of ideas. I'm going to stop sharing my screen and come back to me. Before I speak about those specifics and we look at any particular ideas and how you rest, recover, recharge, and we come back to those concepts of lifestyle, mental health, and basically habits that will build into your well-being. For us to understand where I'm coming from, I'd like to give you a foundational understanding that relates to well-being, but also relates to teaching. It's something that a lot of people find difficult to grasp at first, because particularly teachers are so emotionally invested in their students' lives. But I can tell you that if you model this, you'll not only improve your own well-being, but you'll start to improve the well-being of your students. And that is the concept that the success or failure of your students is not your responsibility. So I'm going to say that again. The success or failure of your students is not your responsibility. Now, that's not me saying that. If you'd like to look up, I'm going to read a quote from a psychologist, very well-known psychologist, who is actually the psychology that we base a lot of our modern day discipline structures on in schools. It's a psychologist by the name of Alfred Adler, and I'll read you a quote from him. It says, "A fight with a child is always a losing fight. He can never be beaten or won to cooperation by fighting. In these struggles, the weakest always carries the day. Something is demanded of him which he refuses to give, something which can never be gained by such means. An incalculable amount of tension and useless effort would be spared in this world if we realized that cooperation and love can never be won by force." Now, as I read that, you can probably think of some situations you've had from a discipline point of view, which are often the things that sap energy the most when it comes to education. Now, when I used to teach, I would say to my students, whether you do your work or not, I don't care. What I care about is that I know I'm providing you with the best possible opportunity to grow and to learn. So this is when I come back to when I said it's not your responsibility whether your students are successful or not. It is, however, your responsibility to provide them with an opportunity to maximize everything you're offering them in that lesson. Now, that might mean different things for different people because everyone has a different teaching style. But as soon as you relieve yourself of that pressure, that immediately makes a difference to the way you go about your day. I'd like you to use that as a base for understanding of the next few things we speak about. I'm not seeing our time. How are we doing from a time point of view?
We're about halfway there.
Okay, great.
20 minutes to go.
Okay, perfect. Now, I'd like to focus first of all on mental health. I'm going to throw out another question. I'm so glad that that you mention mental health as affecting physical health, because mental health is something people still don't fully understand. There is so much still to learn. I can tell you, I went through depression in 2007. That is 16 years ago. And at the time, the doctor I went to prescribed me medication because that's what doctors do, because doctors study medicine, which is why they prescribe medication. Okay. Now, the doctor had my best interests at heart, but that doctor prescribed me medication that was highly damaging and highly addictive. It took my own research to figure that out. My point of mentioning that is that was 16 years ago, and we've learned a lot since then, particularly in the area of nutrition, exercise. A lot of you, as I'm saying that, will think of things that you yourself currently engage in from an exercise or a nutrition point of view, because you know it works for you, and that's brilliant. The reality, though, is there is still so much to learn, so much to learn. So I don't want to try and teach people about mental health. It's such a massive concept, but I want to try and narrow it down to a few things that are within our control. Controlling the controllables. It's something elite sportsmen and women are able to do. It's something top CEOs are able to do. It's an ability to look at factors in life that affect our lives and say, what can I control right now? And let's look at what I can do about that. What are the things I can't control? Let me not waste any energy on that. And then that's another whole category, because that's when we then look at the factors we can't control. That's when we look at perspective and we think, well, that little thing that happened over there, that's really horrible and I feel terrible about that. But if I change the way I view it, perhaps I can turn that into a positive. And again, that would be another whole level. That's why I say there is so much we can talk about when it comes to mental health. But the reason I enjoy the concepts of mental health affecting physical is that this thing up here literally does control everything else that goes on in your body. So yes, doing physical exercise can improve our mental health, but at the same time, your state of mind, which can be controlled by one little altercation you have with a parent, also affects your physical health. It can make you sick. It can make you feel terrible. Similarly, having a really good experience and a really positive lesson, one where you walk out of that and go, oh my gosh, those students were so engaged. I nailed that. Yeah, that was you. You did that. You nailed that. And you feel brilliant. You feel like a little bit of a mini high, the same as you might feel after a cup of coffee. Caffeine, by the way, is really good for you, just not too much. Okay. So with all of that in mind, I want to speak about three concepts. Before I go on to those three, I'd like you to consider what I spoke about with stamina as our base for everything else we say now. So think of that stamina graph going up and down. Okay. I'd like you to write these things down. If you have somewhere to write something down, because you are going to discuss it in a couple of minutes. We're going to go with 3 things. Again, the theme of 3. So we've got rest, recover, recharge. Okay. I'm going to give you 3 ideas, and then you're going to fill in the blanks. Because again, everybody is different. Everybody responds differently to different things. And again, that concept of if you're the one who comes up with the ideas, you're more likely to implement those ideas. The first one is routine. If you can write that down. The second one is boundaries. And the third one is habits. Now, there's a little something in each of those that the people who spoke have already mentioned, which is why I say I love it when people do my job for me, sorry. I'm going to go through each of those very much as an overview perspective. And then we're going to do an activity to finish off that is going to have some follow-up activities. Now, I'm not going to be there for those follow-up activities, which is why it is going to come down to entirely your responsibility as to how you go about that. And it'll make sense when we get to the end as to what your task will be. But it's something that I hope is going to be something you can take away from this and run with continuously and be responsible and accountable to each other rather than the person speaking to you. So often when we go to a talk, I don't know about you, but I know I've been to talks where I've listened to some incredible people share some wonderful ideas. But in that moment, when you're listening to that person talk, and if you think of yourself as a teacher as well, it can often be misconstrued that we place a lot of our belief in that person. Your students will do this with you. They'll place a lot of their reliance on confidence, on their ability in that subject matter, on you. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. Just like you sitting here right now and implementing some of the things we're going to go away and do now is not dependent on me, which is why I like to do as little as possible and get you to do as much as possible. So before we jump into an overview of those 3 factors, I just wanted to share my reason for steering this conversation this way, and the topic of rest, recover, recharge. And again, I'll say, think of what those 3 words mean to you, because that's really important in the activity you're going to do now. My reason for speaking about those is because for me personally, I love exercise. I've always loved it. I love food and I love eating healthily. People sometimes say to me, don't you miss like not eating dessert every night or not going out and eating that burger a couple of times a week or not getting takeaway or whatever? And the reality is that I don't. I love eating healthily. And the reason I love it is because I feel good about it. I, however, have a problem. I'm not good at recovering. I don't enjoy stretching after exercise. I don't enjoy yoga. I don't enjoy meditating, for example. I don't enjoy sitting quietly by myself. I don't enjoy recovery. I love sleeping. I will be honest, I do love sleeping, like most people. Okay. But it is something I've had to learn. It's an obstacle I've had to overcome, because if you do not recover as a human being, your mental health suffers. As a teacher, if you do not recover and your mental health suffers, your teaching suffers. If your teaching suffers, your students don't make progress. If your students don't make progress, your mental health suffers even more. And then you have problems. So let's try and avoid that.
There you go. 10 minutes. 5 minutes.
Cool. Okay. Fortunately, I don't have to be there while you get onto this activity. So routine. I would like you to focus on routine from two perspectives. First of all, what is a repeatable and reliable and predictable, repeatable, reliable, predictable routine that you can follow in your own life every day? So for me, I have a routine I go through in the morning. There's a whole lot of other things I do during the day, but those things can change because your day changes, right? Things happen. But what is the part of your day you can control? So repeatable, reliable, and predictable. What is a repeatable, reliable, predictable routine you can implement in your own life? Even if it's only something for 10 minutes of a day. And then implement the same thing, not the same routines, but the same concept to your lessons. What is repeatable, reliable, and predictable for your students? For me, and I'll run through this very quickly, I like to do three things when I was teaching. I would start every lesson with my students writing down three things they're grateful for. Every lesson. Write down three things you're grateful for. One of those things must be something they're comfortable sharing. The other two do not need to share. But one, they must be able to share. Okay. The second thing I would do is at the end of every lesson, spend 5 minutes doing two things. One, what did you learn today? However you get the students to record that, up to you. What did you learn today? Or you could rephrase that question, how have you improved as a human being in the last hour? That's getting them to take accountability for their own progress. And the third one is give myself a rating. And this is your students, by the way, but you could do it for yourself if you wanted to. This is your students. Give myself a rating of my effort today. Now, effort is progress plus behavior. So you get your students to give themselves a rating, call it 1 to 5. Okay. Now, that gives you three things you can do every single lesson that is repeatable, predictable for your students. It gives them a bit of structure to follow, and it gives them healthy habits, and it gets them to take accountability for their own progress, which affects your own health and well-being. Boundaries. This does tie into the first one of routine. How late do you work at night? What conversations do you have with your spouses when you go home at night? How much do you talk about that badly behaved student in your class? How much do you talk about the really difficult conversation you had with a parent? When you go out with friends, how much of the conversation is spent talking about your problems at work? These are all boundaries we need to implement. How late are we working? How much mental space is being taken up by work after work? Now, again, those boundaries are different for everyone. So I'm not going to tell you what they should or shouldn't be. I'm just planting the seed for you to think about it. The third one, habits. Now, I'm going to speak about one very specific habit. This little thing here is a recipe for disaster. That little thing here, when you find yourself scrolling through Instagram or Twitter/X or even WhatsApp or whatever it might be, that is causing a spike in dopamine in your brain, which works the same way as cocaine. Yes, it does. I know that might be something people find difficult to conceptualize, but it works the same as highly addictive drugs. It's designed that way. Some of us have a problem with it. It's a negative habit. All of us have negative habits in our lives. We also all have some really positive habits in our lives. So when I mention habits, I'd like you to think of some of the negative habits in your life. And then as a group exercise, and how this ties in together in the next little group exercise you're going to do, I'd like you to consider some positive habits. So tying all three together, In your same groups of 3, I'm not one of those who says, now go find a new person to speak to and make yourself really uncomfortable. No, go back to the same 3, okay? In your group of 3, look at those 3 things: routine, boundaries, and habits. And I'd like you to have a conversation sharing, but at the same time, sharing things that you perhaps would like to put in place in your own life. So yes, I know that some of them overlap. Routine, boundaries, habits, they all join in together. And I'm deliberately making this open-ended because I'd like you to steer those conversations in any direction you'd like them to go. But there's one thing I'd like you to take away from this and implement. And again, I'm going to leave it up to your group of 3 as to how you do that, okay? I'd like you to commit to a personal routine and a couple of habits that you're going to put in place. Don't pick more than 3. If you pick more than 3, you will fail. Promise you, you will fail. But I'd like you to commit to 1 to 3 habits that you can put into a routine in your own life with your group of 3, share it with them, and then hold each other accountable to that every day. Okay? Hold each other accountable to that every day. How you do that, whether that's over WhatsApp, whether you put something more formal in place, doesn't matter. That's up to you. You steer that the way you would like to. But that group of 3, they are going to be the people who hold you accountable to that 1 to 3 habits, healthy habits that you're putting in place. You don't need to share your negative habits with those people. That's up to you to think about, okay? I just wanted to plant that seed so that you can go away today and go, let me write down some of the negative habits in my life. And generally speaking, we can't remove negative habits without replacing them with some positive ones, okay? So I'll give you an example. If I look at this thing, what I've done in my own life is because I've noticed it's a habit that I will sit and look at it when I'm bored. If that's at night, that's affecting my sleep. So what I've done is I've put a time limit on my phone. If you don't know how to do that, ask one of your students to show you. They'll probably know, okay? And you can set your phone so that it literally blocks you from accessing any of your apps at a certain time every day. I've done that on my phone. That is now a habit. I've set it up. So I know at 9 p.m. every day, I cannot use my phone any longer. Simple as that, okay? Now I've removed a negative habit and now I must go and find something else to do, like reading. Imagine that for a concept. Okay. So the activity, discuss those 3 areas, the routine, and the routine from 2 perspectives, routine with your students and routine in your own life. Boundaries, discuss the concept of boundaries for yourself, okay, with work/personal lives. And then habits. And as I say, I know habits ties back into routine. And then I'd like you, as a takeaway, 1 to 3 habits that you're going to implement in your own life that will uplift and help you to rest, recover, recharge.